apologetics does is it teaches us how to make a case against maybe some objections that people have or some questions that they have, or to be able to answer those questions. So that's what I talk about on the website. Yeah, there we go. There's the address in case you want to check it out. I post there once every couple weeks. I still do have a regular job, so I have to do that too. I always struggled with knowing how to communicate and how to talk to people and share what I believe. I got a lot of, I should be saying this, but I didn't get a lot of how do I do that? How do I have those conversations with people? And when I try to figure out how to do something, what I do is I look for examples. Like I look for real-world examples of people that are doing that kind of thing. So when I was younger, the only examples that I got was like a televangelist, right? And I wasn't that guy, so I wasn't going to be able to do that. And the other example I got was like a street preacher, standing up and pointing his finger and condemning people, and I'm not comfortable doing that kind of stuff, so I couldn't do that either. And then the other thing that I got was, people walking door to door handing out pamphlets. And look, I did sales for a couple summers. Anybody ever buy Cutco cutlery before? Okay, I was that guy, right? I was the guy who got your number from a friend and called you up and said, "Hey, I got this great stuff you should check out." And I hated that. I hated calling people and barging in on them and stuff like that. So that I couldn't do that either. So I was kind of stuck. Like I didn't know, how I was supposed to go out and share and talk about the gospel. And I took a long time off. I took a long time away from the Bible and took a long time away from Christ. And I still believed in God and stuff, but I didn't know how to have those conversations. And then what I did was I came across a man named Greg Kokel. Well, I came across several men, but one of them was Greg Kokel. And he runs a website called Stand to Reason. And it's an apologetics website. And what they promote is this thing known as the ambassador model. Greg talks about how to be an ambassador and how we can live our lives out as ambassadors. But Greg didn't get it he didn't make that up. He actually got it from a verse in Scripture, which is 2 Corinthians 5:20. So if you guys want to turn to that real quick, we can read through it. I have a slide for it. Okay, so this is Paul's second letter to the Corinthians. In it, he says, "We are therefore Christ's ambassadors, as though God were making his appeal through us. We implore you on Christ's behalf, be reconciled to God." So Paul tells us here that we have to be ambassadors in order to go out and present the gospel. The name of my website, Legati Christi, is actually Latin for ambassadors for Christ. And when I started to think of myself as an ambassador, that's when it all started to click, right? Like I know what an ambassador does, and that taught me the tasks that I needed to do to really know how to go out and have those conversations. And I want you to notice in here, Paul says, we are therefore Christ's ambassadors. So he doesn't say we should be. He doesn't say we should want to be. He says we are, because we are. Once you tell somebody that you're a Christian, or that you go to church, or things like that, or you throw out a Bible verse, you are automatically an ambassador. They know this thing called Christianity, and they know that you're representing that, so they are automatically going to start judging you, or judging Christianity based on what you're doing. Like, when I was a kid, my mom always said, "Look, you are representing this family, so don't mess this up," right? So it's kind of the same thing. Like, when we go out, and when I was a kid, I was representing my family. So, if I did something wrong, or if I looked like a fool, I was making my family look bad. So, and it's the same thing. Whenever we let somebody know that we're a Christian, we're automatically an ambassador, and we're automatically a representative of Jesus and the gospel. So what are some of the roles of an ambassador? So one of the roles of an ambassador is ambassadors speak on behalf of a sovereign nation to foreign nations. So let's think about that in the context of an ambassador from the United States when they go out and they talk to foreign nations. In the United States, when an ambassador goes out, he talks about things that have made our country great, things like free trade, or not free trade, free economy, open markets, democracy. Those are the things that have made us a great nation. And when we see nations that are struggling, we want to give them that message and say, and teach them about the free economy and democracy to help them kind of grow their nations too. So that's one of the roles of an ambassador. As followers of Jesus, we represent a sovereign nation as well. And Jesus says that in John 18:36. He says that my kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jewish leaders. So he tells us that we're of a different kingdom. We're not of this world. And I know that sounds kind of alien or whatever. So you don't want to kind of present that to somebody as far as saying we're not of this world, because that does sound kind of weird. But in here we can say that, right? Here we know what that means. We know that when we're not of this world, it means we're destined for something else after this life. There is an afterlife. So last week, if you were here, we had Tim, who was a member of this church, and now he's going out into Papua New Guinea, and he's kind of taken seat in a community and helped raise up a church there. They're a great example of being ambassadors. And if you remember his message last week, I want you to think of what he's doing as being an ambassador, because he is. And some of the things that I want to talk about today line up with what he did. But you don't have to go to a foreign nation to be an ambassador. You don't have to. If you're called to go to some of these places, awesome, do it. But we don't have to go out to foreign places in order to be an effective ambassador for the gospel. We can do that right here. So on the ambassador model, Stand to Reason has an ambassador model that they put up, and they break down. I want to go through some specifics, but basically all these different things that we can do as ambassadors break down to three different things, three different categories: knowledge, character, and wisdom. So knowledge is knowing the message that you need to portray. You got to know what you stand for. So when an ambassador goes to a foreign nation, he has to understand what it is that we want to present as a country. What message do we want to send? And being a Christian and sharing your conviction is no different. You have to know what the Bible teaches about topics. And listening to the pastor on Sunday is not enough. You have to spend time reading and studying and looking at the questions that are presented and the challenges that are presented in order to know how to address those and be able to send the message. So just being here on Sunday isn't enough. You have to spend time in the Bible to really get the full message. So the second thing is wisdom. You have to know how to have conversations to talk about it. You have to understand the culture that you're in. You have to understand certain things. You can't just start reading the Bible and have that conversation. You have to know how to present that message to people and have real conversations, because you're not going to preach to people. You have to have, real discipleship is done through conversation, not through preaching. So you have to be able to have those conversations. And then the last thing is character. So you have to know the message, and you have to present it with good character in a winsome and lighthearted way. You don't have to be condemning. You don't have to be, overbearing. You have to live out this message, right? Like you can't, because people are watching. The number one thing that people complain about Christians is they're judgmental and they're hypocritical. So you have to live out the message of the gospel to also get their trust and be able to share with them. So you can't be a good talker and a nice guy and not know what the message is, because you're not going to be able to tell them anything. That's really like thin, kind of lighthearted communication. If it's empty, so they're not going to get anything out of that conversation. And you can't be full of knowledge and a really great person, but not know how to have a conversation. That's a lot of academics have that problem. I have that problem sometimes because I like to talk way up here sometimes, and I have to bring it down. But you have to be able to talk to people with good conversation and wisdom. And then you can't know every verse be a good conversationist, but be a jerk. I mean, that's bad character. So you have to kind of meld all three of these things together in order to be a good ambassador. So what are some of the more specific traits of an ambassador? Paul lays out a great example that I want to read, and then we'll work through some of these examples as things that an ambassador that we know of can say. So this is in 1 Corinthians 9, 20 to 22. And in there, Paul says, "To the Jews, I became like a Jew, to win the Jews. To those under the law, I became like one under the law, though I myself am not under the law, so as to win those under the law. To those not having the law, I became like one not having the law, though I am not free from God's law, but I am under Christ's law, so as to win those not having the law. To be weak, I became weak, to win the weak. I have become all things to all people, so that by all possible means I might save some." So the main point of that passage is Paul was living in the cultures, but he was not of the cultures, right? He said that he was with those that had the law, but he himself was not of the law. So Paul understood that he needed to be in these cultures to talk to people, because that's where the people were that needed to be saved. He was there to talk to them, but he didn't have to be of that culture, so he could be in but not of. So the first trait that an ambassador has is ambassadors build relationships. They don't just walk in and start making demands. So if we want to, I don't want to get political, but let's talk about trade a little bit. If we want to have better trade with somebody, we walk in and we build a relationship with that person, and we should say, we want to have better relations with you, and we want to build trust and that kind of stuff. We don't walk in and start making demands. That's not how things get done. We build up relation and try to come to agreement that way. You can't point your finger at someone and yell at them to repent if that's the first thing you ever said to them. If you see somebody doing something wrong and you look at them and you say, "You need to repent right now," they're going to just kind of shrug their shoulders and say, "I don't even know what that means." So you have to develop these things over time. They don't come at the first instance. For example, when my family and I have gone to Comic-Con a few times, or concerts or whatever, there's almost always somebody or a group of people outside picketing with signs and telling us that we're all worshiping idols and we're going to go to hell because we're here and how sinful it is. You don't save people that way. People just, and what happens when they do that? I mean, they just walk on by, right? I mean, nobody pays them any attention, and they just keep on walking. So, and if that tactic isn't very effective, to sit there and just point your finger at somebody condemningly to get them to do something. And I think that we do that because we feel like at this one instant, we have to bring somebody to the cross, like right now. We feel like we have to, with every conversation, turn that person into a Christian. And it doesn't work that way. These kind of conversions and these kind of things, they happen over the course of time. I wrote an article on the website about playing baseball. Like sharing your faith is like being in God's economy is like playing a game of baseball, right? Baseball isn't a game of home runs, it's a game of small ball. People get batted around the bases one at a time. So that means I have a conversation with this person, and that may move them to second base. And then somebody else has a conversation, and that may move them to third base. And somebody else has a conversation, and that may bring them home. So we shouldn't feel pressured that every single conversation we have has to bring them to the foot of the cross, because it doesn't work that way. These relationships come over time. So before they listen to you, the first thing they're going to do is look at your character. They're going to see whether or not you can be trusted. When Tim was here last week, he said they spent a lot of time there. They spent time, helping with things around the community and serving food and doing all these things. And it took them 4 or 5 years, I think he said, before they planted the first church. So it takes time. We have to be willing to invest in those relationships with people in order to get the conversation going. And that builds up trust. So once they realize that they can trust him, then they're ready to hear what he has to say on the Christian worldview. What Greg Kokel says, he puts it as put a stone in people's shoe, give them something to think about. Like when I have a conversation with somebody about the gospel, I have a very, very modest goal. My goal isn't instant conversion. My goal isn't to make them fall on their knees at that point and just beg for forgiveness. My goal is just to give them something to think about. It's a very modest goal. I mean, the gospel may not even come up, but if I understand the Christian worldview enough, that how the world works from our perspective, then I can kind of push them along that journey and give them something to think about and walk away with. And it's called putting a stone in your shoe, because you ever get a little pebble in your shoe? And you start walking around, and it's like, man, that annoys me. So if you put a stone in their shoe, then that gives them something to think about, and they got to chew on that for a minute, and maybe they'll come to a different realization. All right, so the second trait of an ambassador is ambassadors spend time in foreign soil. An ambassador doesn't do his country much good if he stays in his office, right? He has to go out into the foreign nation to make things happen. The foreign nation rarely comes to them. And in order to do that, in order to be in the foreign soil, they learn the language and the culture and how the culture works and things like that. So they take time to understand how that foreign culture works. And they oftentimes enjoy being in the culture, enjoy being around lots of different people. I mean, man, I come from Ohio originally, and from a small farming community, right? So I am from the Bible Belt. I am as waspy as it gets, okay? So one of the best things about Los Angeles is the diversity of culture. I mean, so many different people and different lifestyle, different food. The food, man, like that's my favorite part about living in Los Angeles is the different food. So ambassadors like that kind of stuff, right? Like they like to be around different people and different cultures. And as Christians, we think of this building and these people in here, this is our home country. This is where we feel at home, right? And we come in and we feel great because we sing these great songs and they make us feel great, and we're worshiping God. And we love seeing all the happy people and smiling. And I got to tell you, when I come here every Sunday, I feel recharged, ready to go. But I feel ready to go out there and into the foreign nation, so to speak, because that's where the work gets done. And Jesus didn't say, if you build it, they will come. That was a movie. He told his apostles, he told them to go make disciples. And they didn't stay put. I mean, they started the church in Jerusalem, but then they went out. They were in Asia. They were all over the Mediterranean. They went out. They didn't stay there at home. So we have to go out and live that outside. And the foreign nation, so to speak, we look at things on TV and things in the movies and things in the news and like the way people behave on social media. Man, that just feels foreign to us. Like, it just feels wrong. Like, the way people treat each other, it's just not right. So that feels foreign. But if we just click that off and don't pay attention, then we're losing the opportunity to learn about the culture and what it's portraying. And that's important, because when you understand what it is they're saying, then you can kind of fit the Christian worldview into the context of that message, into what's being said. For example, Jurassic World, okay? When you go watch Jurassic World, it's all about dinosaurs and all about, the evolution of dinosaurs and stuff, and you can get into conversations about evolution, about Darwinian evolution, and you can get into conversations about science. I mean, a lot of people feel that science and Christianity are incompatible, and they're not. I mean, they fit together. And we have that perspective, and we can start that conversation with them to say, no, Christianity isn't anti-science. I mean, we have lots of evidence in the Bible for what science has found. They were just saying it a long time ago and just didn't know how to say it in scientific terms, right? I mean, in the 60s or whatever it was, they discovered the Big Bang. Okay, Genesis 1:1, in the beginning, God. Okay, we've been saying that for 6,000 years, and those things can line up. So if we understand movies and what's being said, we can then kind of flip the Christian worldview into those conversations and help them to kind of see where we're coming from and how what we believe makes sense. Okay, so the next trait is effective ambassadors learn the language. So when Tim was here last week, he talked about, I asked him, I said, when you went there, did you make the villagers learn English or did you learn their language? And he said, oh no. He said, we spent time learning their language, learning how they talk, so that we could talk to them. I mean, when you go to a foreign nation, you want to put that person in their comfort zone. You want to be able to speak to them in something that they can understand, because they need to hear what you have to say. So you have to learn the language in order to do that. So now we're going to play a little bit of game called What We Say and What They Hear. What we're going to do here is go through some things that Christians say, and then we're going to show how that could be perceived by people who are non-Christian. So the first thing is, you need to open up and be born again. Invite Jesus into your heart. Be washed away by the blood of the Lamb and be sanctified. So this is what they hear when you say that. They see a sheep and they hear blood. And they're like, man, what does that mean? Like, blood and sheep? That sounds gross. So when we say things like that to somebody who's a non-believer, they don't get that. They just feel weirded out and they turn it off. So instead, phrase it in a different way. So another example is this. I don't know. I just have faith. And when we say that, this is what they see. When you say the word faith, and I know that Paul says it all throughout his letters, but when you say the word faith, the culture automatically puts in there blind faith. Blind. And when they say blind faith, what they mean is you believe things counter to what your reason tells you. That's what they think of when we say faith, okay? But I'm here to tell you, my faith is based on a lot of reasoning. Like, I studied the arguments and I went through a lot of it, and that's how I developed my faith. So in this context, instead of saying faith, you should use something more like trust, because that's what we do, right? We trust in God's decisions for us. We have conviction. We've studied these things, and through experience, we trust that God is going to do this. I know when I come home from work, I have faith that my wife is going to have the kids alive. But that's not blind. I mean, that's built on lots of experience and lots of time with her. I know the kind of person she is. I know how awesome of a mother she is. So I have faith that everything's going to be okay when I get home. I don't have to think about it. But that's trust, because I've built that trust over time with her to know how good of a mother she is, to be doing the right thing for my kids. And that's the same thing that we have with Jesus and with God is we have trust. We trust what he's going to do based on experience. So faith is one of those words I try not to use, not because I don't have faith, not because I don't believe in faith or in our faith, but just because the culture has kind of so taken over that term that it's just pointless to use it, because they can't see past the blind faith part. Okay, so the next example, Jesus died for your sins so you can spend eternity in heaven with him and not end up in hell. And when they hear that, they think, you're pointing a finger at him. Like, that's really condemning. Like, why would I even want to listen to you when you're judging me already? You don't know me. When you tell somebody they're going to hell, you don't know them. They're not ready to hear that. You can't say those kind of things to them right away. Right? But there's a different way to say that. So let's do an example. Robert. So here's a sample conversation. Robert, do you believe in that people that commit moral crimes should be punished? Yes. Okay. Good. Have you ever committed a moral crime? A moral crime. Have you ever committed a moral crime? Okay. Good. Because we all have. Me too. I've committed moral crimes. So we have a problem. We believe that people who commit moral crimes deserve punishment. And we've all committed moral crimes. So what do? We all deserve hell, all of us. But the answer is Jesus. And what Jesus did for us is he came and paid that debt for us. He got rid of all of that. So all that stuff has been taken away, and we don't have to worry about that anymore. That's the answer. So that's, see how I kind of did the conversation differently than just automatically saying, you're guilty, you're going to hell. So you have to be able to have a conversation a little differently in order to do those kind of things and not speak in too much Christianese. For example, Jesus spoke in parables. When he went out to the people, he spoke in parables because he wanted to give them stories and language in a context that they could understand. He talked about farming, he talked about agriculture, he talked about sheep and cultural events, and that's how he taught people. He spoke their language. To his apostles now, he spoke in theological terms, but not to just the people in general. So J. Warner Wallace, he's another apologist that I follow. He's a former cold case detective down in Carson, Torrance. And he has this quote that says, "Good communicators throw the ball so people can catch it and avoid confusing, esoteric, technical jargon." So the point is, you want people to listen to what you have to say. So you can't toss around these big terms like badges of honor. You have to put it in language that they understand. You want them to catch it. So I work in IT. And if my boss comes to me and says, "Man, the network is really slow right now. What's going on?" I can't look at him and say, "Well, there are some nodes on the LAN that are committing an ARP flood against the edge router, so the internet is being affected." Okay? There's only two people in this room that know what that means, me and Ron, because Ron's in IT as well, and anybody else that's in IT maybe. Or I could say, "Look, we have a virus, it's affecting the network, it's really slow, we're working on it." Right? I mean, that's the difference. I mean, you can get fed up and you can get tied up in these languages of saying things and feeling like, the way I represent is I got to use the right words, and you don't. You have to have the right meaning, but you don't have to have these specific words or languages that we speak. And unless we're talking about the Bible specifically, it does no good to toss out Bible verses like rocks in the middle of a conversation. If the person doesn't even trust in the Bible in the first place, which a lot of the culture doesn't anymore, it does no good. Do you guys remember a couple months ago when Attorney General Jeff Sessions, they were talking about the issue on the border. And he made this in the middle of a conversation with no context. He says, "I would cite to you the Apostle Paul and his clear and wise command in Romans 13 to obey the law of government because God has ordained them for the purpose of order. Is this true?" Yes. Did he need to say it? No. Because when he said it, the first thing I did was this. Sorry about that. I went, why did he have to say that? Because if you're talking to a majority secular audience who already thinks that Christianity is wrong and full of a bunch of idiots, it does no good to do that. So what he followed up with, though, was that orderly and lawful processes are good in themselves and protect the weak and lawful. Yes. It's the exact same thing he said before he said the Bible verse in the first place, right? Like, he could have just led with that. He didn't have to toss in the Bible verse. Now, we as Christians, we like it when people do that because it kind of affirms us. But that's okay when we're talking amongst each other. But in the grander scheme of things, where they don't even believe that the Bible is true, it does no good. So we have to resist the urge to just start tossing out Bible verses ad nauseum. You don't have to do that. You can say the message that the Bible verse portrays. That's important. Putting it in the context of what the Bible says is important. But throwing out the verses is not. You don't have to do that to prove a point. You don't have to wear the verses like a badge of honor. So the next trait is that ambassadors speak on behalf of their nation. So when an ambassador goes out to a nation, he's speaking, they might as well be the president that's talking. That's what an ambassador is doing. So we have to know and understand what it is, the message that we're portraying, right? And we're given that authority. We're given the authority to speak on behalf of the kingdom of God. And, a lot of times when we go out, people don't have the whole picture. When an ambassador goes to from the U.S. goes to a foreign nation, they base Americans on TV, on the news, on social media, whatever. Perfect example. Not of a foreign nation, but it might as well be because it's Ohio and this is California. When I moved my wife to Ohio in the 90s, the two popular things in culture, gangster rap and Beverly Hills 90210. Okay, so they thought she either lived in South Central or Beverly Hills. Okay, she grew up in Northridge. Okay, and we get that. We know what Northridge means, right? We've been, right, earthquakes, right? But they only get the picture that's been put out to them by media and by TV and that kind of stuff. So that's what foreign nations get. So as an ambassador, you have to spend a lot of time, just like she did, a lot of time saying, no, that's not what it means. This is really what Christianity is all about. This is what we believe on this topic. This is how we see this topic. This is how we see this topic. That's apologetics. That's where apologetics comes in. It's being able to have those conversations and know how to present things and how to refute claims and how to answer questions and that. That's apologetics. Because the image that people get of us from the media is that we're self-righteous and we're bigoted and we're judgmental and all those kind of things. That's what the media says. That's when you watch a movie, that's what the Christians are portrayed as. They're pointing their fingers at people, or they just go walk around going, "Oh, I don't know, I just have faith." I mean, that's what the movie, the TV and movie stuff is, and that's not how it is. We don't live our life that way. So we have to spend time presenting ourselves in the way that Christianity really works. So the last thing is ambassadors get their hands dirty. And what that means is you can't know the culture from the palace, right? If an ambassador goes to a foreign nation, he can't spend all his time in the palace or in the White House or whatever and realize that's how the culture works, because it's not. When people come to the White House, they're getting wined and dined and all that kind of stuff. If they don't go out and see how America really is, they don't know how America really is. And if they don't go out and see, if we don't in turn go out and see how the culture really is, then we don't know how the culture really is. So ambassadors go out and get their hands dirty and get their boots dirty. And we shouldn't be afraid to do that. So there's a lot of things that the culture does that we may think are wrong. And Paul gives a great example of him being in the culture again, where he says, if an unbeliever invites you to a meal and you want to go, eat whatever they put before you without raising questions of conscience. So what he's saying is it's okay to go out and partake in certain things, but you have to know where your limits are. Okay, if you want to go out to a bar, and this may be controversial, okay, but if you want to go out to a bar and have a beer, that's fine. Just don't get drunk. That's the sin. You understand the difference? You have to know where the line is, because when you, I'm not telling everybody to go out and get drunk and start drinking beer today, okay? So please don't take it that way. What I'm saying though is those are the kind of places where these conversations happen. I mean, Jesus was spending time with prostitutes and with tax collectors eating dinner, okay? And he wasn't there because he wanted to partake of their services. He was there to spread the gospel. That's where it got done, and so you can't be afraid to have those conversations in those places. That's okay. You understand your limits. Like Paul said, he went out and talked to people of the law, but he wasn't of the law. He knew the difference. And that's where the being in but not of comes into play. So we can't be afraid to go out and do those kind of things. And I talked about the culture having a wrong sense of us, on the flip side, we could also have a wrong sense of the culture. And you're not going to know if you get your sense of the culture from TV and media, and that's the only place you get it, and you're not doing it through conversation, then you're doing it wrong too. You have to have those conversations with people to understand where it is they're coming from in order to be able to, in turn, put in the Christian worldview into the conversation. And you know what? If you get in those situations where you're in a social situation, talking about the WASPy thing, my mom, in my hometown is 1,000 people, okay? My high school was 135 kids in the middle of 3 cornfields, okay? We have 1 bar in the town, 1 stoplight, 1 gas station. It's that place. And my mom, it's just me and her in the room, okay? She's telling me about this great event, and the local bar donated some money to the church for this great event. And in the room, she was like, I had to go in the bar. Like, she whispered it, like, Mom, it's okay. She was very uncomfortable going in there, but that's okay. It's okay to do that kind of stuff. And you understand your bounds. You know where the line gets drawn. It's okay to be in those kind of situations. And we have to be in those situations in order to have the conversations that are required. So, in conclusion, as followers of Jesus, we represent him in everything that we do. To our spouses, to our kids, to our friends and coworkers, we shouldn't seek to stop building up on those. We shouldn't seek to stop building up and staying in our own comfortable situations. We need to be in the culture, but not of it. And we need to be ready to show that what the Bible says is true, and that the Christian worldview makes the most sense in how the world works. And thinking of ourselves as ambassadors is a great way to get those conversations going and to handle those situations. Thank you.